criticism, of anxiety, and of not knowing. This moment certainly tells God's community what it's like to live in between times and how we might live fully there. As Jesus approaches Lazarus' tomb, this is an in-between time for him too. Yes, even Jesus. God did not have to put God's very essence into this situation, but God did. Jesus is at this moment between life and death that awaits him on the cross. He will walk through pain and suffering and dying in his in-between time to be true to his identity and to his future. There were some who wanted him to come earlier to ease their own anxiety or to cope with their own sense of loss. Jesus was true to his journey. One insight into the alternate path of the most of this in-between time is to know what we are resolved to follow and to follow it through, even when it doesn't seem like the easy way out. A second insight into the alternate path of the most of the in-between times is to be cognizant of the obvious grief of Jesus. In few other passages do we experience his deep down humanity when we observe how Jesus grieved for Lazarus. Jesus loved this man deeply and dearly, and when he finally came full face to his own personal sense of loss at the death of Lazarus, Scripture reports that Jesus wept. Jesus also wept because he knew that as he called this man back from death to life, he was sealing the path of his own demise and his own death. His enemies will get him for this. When we experience the most of the in-between times, grief, deep sorrow, a gripping sense of loss will be present for us, and it is unhealthy and unrealistic for us not to recognize and own it as being part of the journey through our interim. Even in moving from death to life, there are ways in which our experiences will never be the same. There are ways in which the bearings which give us meaning will have moved, and the tones and the sounds which have developed a much different pitch. I have heard, not directly from many of you, but I have heard around the edges as I have listened to conversations how your bearings have changed in the last 2 years. And I have heard some of the grief on the edges. I'm here to tell you this morning that that is normal. A huge part of your life has shifted. It is normal to feel a sense of loss. So feel it. Walk it through. Let it be. And if you want someone to walk with you through it, I will be more than happy to do that. You do not need to grieve alone. I want to remind you again, this is the experience of most of the in-between times, a sense of loss. It is the experience of Jesus. It is our own experience. When we validate our own loss, hope returns and life blooms and a future lives. A third insight into the alternate path of the most of the in-between times is there is a definite role for the community to play together in the movement from death to life. Jesus being who Jesus is, he could have raised Lazarus any old way he wanted to. He could have done it privately, without much fuss. He could have done it personally, without any help from anybody else. But what does he do? Notice what he does. Jesus not only shouted to Lazarus the powerful words, "Come out!" He also instructed, you could even say probably, he ordered the community to unbind him and let him go. It is very much God's way to get humanity involved in the project of bringing life about again. The way Jesus chose was to give others work to do by asking people to roll the stone to the grave away and then to unbind Lazarus to help take off his linen shroud. Set that man free. Set him free. Let him dance. By the way, I've seen some of you dance. At the Tunnel of Love in February. And I'll leave it there. Let him dance. Set him free. Pull his bindings off. Come out. Come out. Come out, wherever you are. Come out. God seems to be always like that. Always seeking us out, never leaving us alone to our own devices, always asking us for cooperation. We are invited to join God in God's work of redemption. We are an important part of the plan. When you grieve for someone, you grieve because they have been an important part of your plan, and that's absent now. When I grieve the same way, for the same thing. We are invited to join God in God's work of redemption, to be a part of Christ's church, to help roll the stones away and to unbind humanity, to remove grave clothes from people entombed in fear or loneliness or failure or resentment or wounds. So it appears then that we have our collective work cut out for us in this, the most of our in-between times. To know what we are resolved to follow and to follow it through even when it doesn't seem like the easy way out. To acknowledge that grief is an activity of the community during this time and to give permission for this to happen, to encourage it to happen, to help roll stones away and unbind humanity, to remove grave clothes from people entombed. Let him go. Come out. Yesterday, at the leadership retreat, some wise guy asked me at the end, it was Craig, who asked me at the end, I can call him a wise guy this morning, he's here, and I know him a little bit, asked me extemporaneously to give some feedback to what had been done by the group those, how many hours? 20 hours, 15 hours, 10 hours. And one of the things I said was that your leadership has laid out a huge task for all of us in the next year or so. And I look at it and I have a sense to say it is daunting. But then I also said, I didn't leave it there, remember? Those of you who were there, I also said, if it isn't a challenge, I don't want any part of it. I go looking for a challenge. If you're not going to do hard work and climb big mountains, leave me out. Leave me out. That's the task of the most of our in-between times. It's hard work. It's daunting. It's a little bit fearsome. We're going to do what together? But we are committed. And God will give us strength and vision and faith as a community, because God will be there running right alongside and before us. Thanks be to God. Amen.